Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is History 121, American History 2, from Reconstruction through modern times. I want to take a moment before we get started and apologize for the mess that's come of this class in the last couple of weeks. I have been going through some training in order to better facilitate the online teaching experience. I realize that things aren't going the way they should have gone. Looking back, I know I'd said through email that I was going to post the exam this week. I'm going to post the exam by Friday. You will have one physical week in order to finish that exam. The exam will be, I will give you 5 essay questions. You will answer 4 of them. They will be worth 25 points apiece. For the 100-point exam, as noted in the syllabus, you will be able to use your resource books in order to take the exam. I will then reconfigure the schedule and get things caught up from here. I want to deeply apologize for this. This is not something that I intended to happen. But we're going to make changes, and I'm moving forward, and we're going to pick this class up and have a heck of a rest of the semester. So today I want to start wrapping up the end of the 19th century. We've talked about Western expansion. We've talked about the problems of industrialization when we mentioned food reforms and the jungle. What I want to talk about today is the rise of populism and the push for reform at the end of the 19th century. So what is populism? And this is going to be a lecture that actually has some connotations for today's political environment. Because we hear the term populism a lot even today. What is it? It's not any one particular thing. It's not something you can generally put your finger on and say, this is populism. In general, populism is a movement or a conglomeration of movements pushed by the people in order to seize power from those in control or seen as being in control of the government, those in power who may or may not have ignored the problems that people are perceiving in their own lives. It's that response to perceived wrongs. Well, things are going bad for me. Obviously, the government hasn't done anything to help me out, so I need to vote for somebody radical who's going to step in and do something that the mayor, the governor, the senator, or the president aren't doing right. Generally, these start as grassroots movements at the local political level that are about economic reform or reform of some aspect of society. And we'll get to an example. I'll go into detail in a little bit, but generally, in the late 19th century, these concerns are about agriculture and agrarian life, the use of alcohol, and problems with the labor movement. As far as agrarian problems go, farmers in the late 19th century were in a pretty rough spot. The Panic of 1873 had pretty well ruined the American economy and had done a number on the world economy, to be honest. Just as the lack of an operating economy was starting to get better, farmers are faced with a wide-scale drought in the 1880s. They're not able to produce the amount of crops that they'd previously done. The prices are going to go up that they're getting for their crops. That's great, except that they're not growing enough to be able to take advantage of that. So farmers are they're going to continue being in a deep economic hole. If you add on to that, railroads are a real financial burden for farmers in the late 19th century. Railroads are the lifeline for farmers in every possible way. If you live in rural America in the late 19th century, Yeah, you might have a mercantile store or a general store. Think of a very small scale Walmart. But you're also paying if you want to have something that's not produced locally. If you want to have that brought into your, if you want to buy that to bring it into your community, you're having to pay railroad shipping fees as well as the price of the product. If you add to that, you have to pay railroad shipping fees to take your product to market to sell your wheat or your corn or your beef or your pork. Farmers are being charged high shipping fees on every end of their transactional life by the railroads. So they're getting hit even harder economically. This is all this is all going to be made worse by market speculation, by land speculation. We're going to artificially manipulate the price of goods. We're going to artificially manipulate the price of land. It gets harder and harder for farmers to get out of this massive debt that they're facing. There have been some early attempts at reform for farmers. In the 1870s, we see a fraternal organization called the Grange or the Grangers rise up. This is an attempt to, in essence, organize farmers. It styles itself a secret society, and it still exists today. It's based on mutual aid amongst brothers in the Grange and the education of their children, and to make farmers understand and use better agricultural techniques, better aspects of farming. The Grange is going to start as this beneficial society. Unfortunately, what we're going to see happen to it, and I apologize if you can hear my dog in the background, they're going to start getting a little too radical beyond the mutual assistance aspect. They're going to try and cut out the middlemen. They're going to try and establish grain elevators that they own and operate so that they can control the price that member farmers can receive for their grains, trying to get them a better price on the market. They're actually going to attempt to manufacture their own implements because they feel that companies like John Deere or what is going to start J.I. Case or McCormick are charging too high a price for the goods that they're manufacturing and selling to farmers. They're going to attempt to cut out the middleman in some of these aspects to lower the input prices for farmers. Unfortunately, with the Panic of 1873 and the ensuing hard times, it's going to cause the Grangers to fail miserably. They will, their business attempts to help the market are going to fail. They're going to lose membership. Some companies will actually take anti-Granger action and say, well, we're not going to give members of the Grangers loans. We're not going to give them special prices on implements or seed or any number of things. And so there will be a heavy business backlash against the Grangers in this time of farmer debt that is going to create even more hard feelings in the farm and agricultural community. We get people like Mary Elizabeth Lease, who, because of the way they're treated in the 1870s, because of the downfall of the Grangers, they're going to encourage the radicalization of farmers to push for what they want. Instead of just saying, hey, if we sit back and every 2 years we vote, eventually people will pay attention to us. Farm organizers like Mary Lease say, raise less corn and raise more hell. Stop growing the crops. Stop taking part in this market that is radically hurting you. Force them to recognize you by withholding your crops from the market and protest. Protest, protest, protest. And what they want with these protests is essentially they want the U.S. government to step in and do what the Grange had failed to do. They want the government to come in and set railroad price controls so that they're not getting gouged by shipping goods to market and getting goods shipped to them when they buy it through Sears or anything that needs to be shipped to them on the railroad. They want the government to establish and control grain elevators in order to give farmers the best possible price on their grain. They want especially a change in currency. The U.S. was on a gold standard. $1 in U.S. currency needed to be backed by $1 worth of gold. Farmers wanted a change to silver. There was more silver in the world. There's more silver in circulation. Silver doesn't have as high a value as gold does. So if you contract a debt under a gold economy, you have to pay you pay back what the price of gold is with your debts. $100 worth of gold is still $100 worth of gold. But if you change to a silver economy, it's going to devalue the currency. And so if I take out $100 worth of debt under a gold economy and all of a sudden that switched to $100 worth of silver, that's much less silver. That's a much cheaper form of currency. And I know it's a little hard to explain because we have a relatively stable currency in today's day and age that's backed by government fiat. But if you look at the precious metals market, the value of precious metals changes every day. And you can specifically go in and see that the price of silver is considerably less than the price of gold. I'm actually looking up the price of gold and silver today to see if I can get some understanding. Right now, as I speak to you, the price of gold per ounce is $332.70 per ounce for gold. See if I can find the silver price per ounce. Silver is currently trading at $16.92 per ounce. So there we have a very graphic example in modern times of how different the value of gold is versus the value of silver. Hopefully that helps you understand why farmers would want to have the government change to a silver-backed currency. It would devalue the currency and, in effect, give farmers a massive form of debt relief. We have other things going on in society besides farm problems that are causing populist movements to become very politically active at this time. One that has been around, honestly, since probably time immemorial is prohibition. The push for people to not consume alcohol, variously called temperance. Prohibition will be the eventually successful movement to ban alcohol. Alcohol is generally seen as the root of all evil for the poor by people who are not poor. Let's face it, there are some people in society that if they have a very hard day, they want to go home and have a beer. They want to obliterate their feelings with alcohol. There are also people in society who come from a German background, an Irish background, an Italian background, where alcohol in some various form is a very distinct part of their culture and how they live their everyday lives. Alcohol, for the Germans, beer is a part of every meal. It represents a nutritional aspect of the calories they consume. It's a cultural aspect of the beer hall, and not going to the beer hall to get drunk, but men going to the beer hall to share time with friends and sing songs and read the newspaper. For Roman Catholics, wine is an important part of the Mass every week to take communion. So alcohol plays a role it plays many roles for many different people throughout society. However, people in a generally upper class situation, when you're looking for one answer to say this will solve all of society's ills, a lot of people say alcohol is the problem. People get drunk on alcohol. When they get drunk, they become abusive. They waste money that could go towards feeding their families or buying a house or buying a better life for their families, any number of issues. Um, Alcohol is a very easy catch-all for improving society. It's also an indirect shot, as I've hinted at immigration. The Germans drink, the Irish drink, the Italians drink. God, we've just had St. Patrick's Day. What is the stereotype of the Irishman in American society? It's an alcoholic. It's a drunk who fights. Any immigrant who drinks is obviously somebody who's wasting their money and abusing their families. And if we can cause them to stop drinking, we will change their lives and the lives of their family for the better. We'll see the rise of organizations like the Women's Christian Temperance Union in 1874 that come together to fight alcohol. They'll go into saloons and they'll smash whiskey bottles, they'll smash barrels of beer, they'll physically protest the presence of alcohol. It's an early form after abolition of political activity for women. Add into this, we also have labor problems, and we've hinted about this when we talked about the jungle. The Industrial Revolution is great for the economy overall. It's horrible for the individual worker. The individual worker is very easily injured. There's no sense of health insurance. There's no sense of sick days. You often work 6 or 7 days a week. There's no weekends. You will work long hours, 10 to 12 hours a day. And very often, these early factory jobs are incredibly dangerous. You combine low wages, dangerous work, long work hours, and no protections for those who become ill or injured or killed on the job, and workers will start banding together for self-protection. We'll see the rise of the first labor unions, especially around, well, they'll rise up in every new industry. The railroad and associated industries are going to be some of the first really heavily unionized jobs in the United States. Once labor unions organize, they're going to start making demands. Hey, we represent the workers. The workers need better pay. The workers would like a day off once a week. The workers would like some form of protection for their jobs. Very often, the answer for the factory owners and for industry is to fire the labor organizers and to fire every member of the union, because they can be replaced. They can be replaced by somebody who doesn't care about the job. They can be replaced by somebody who doesn't care about days off or health insurance. They just want to have a job. The labor unions will learn that it's all right to protest and try and call on factory owners to reform. Unless they physically do something to shut down the factory, they're going to be ignored. So in 1892, we have the first modern labor strike in American history at Homestead. Homestead in Pennsylvania is a Carnegie steel town. The major industry, the only industry in this town, is working for U.S. Steel, making steel goods for the railroad. The workers have made demands about working conditions and pay. The company has ignored them. They have tried to fire the organizers, and ultimately the workers walk out. They shut down the factory by denying the by denying the owners the use of their labor to run the mill. Andrew Carnegie goes on vacation and hands the problems to his. I'm trying to think of what his assistant is. Frick. Frick is kind of an overall assistant for Carnegie throughout his many corporations, and especially with U.S. Steel. Carnegie says, "I'm going on vacation. You need to handle this." And Frick will also go on vacation, but he'll say, "This will be handled by the time I come back." What he does as he goes on vacation is he hires Pinkerton detectives, America's first great detective agency, and strikebreakers. They are involved in almost every major industrial strike in the late 19th and early 20th century. They come in as a private army. The governor will call in the Pennsylvania militia, the National Guard, to try and force the workers back to work. The Pinkertons will come in first. They'll actually assault the strikers. They will, in essence, have a military-style attack against the strikers. They will fire upon them. It's a real shooting battle. The strikers have their own guns. They shoot back. 10 people will be killed overall. The National Guard will be called in after the Pinkertons have failed. And the National Guard will successfully break the strike and force the strikers back to work. And thousands of men who went on strike in Homestead will be blacklisted. They will lose their jobs, and there will literally be a list that circulates in the steel companies, in the coal companies, that says these men are prone to going on strike. These men are strikers. Do not hire them. And so tens of thousands of men will lose their ability to work because they went on strike for better conditions. So that's what's going on with labor. Because of all of this, because of prohibition, because of labor problems, because of agricultural problems, we see the rise of third parties based on individual issues. There will be temperance candidates for president. The labor unions will try and put forward their own candidates. The farmers will seek candidates to run on their behalf for president. They'll put forward issues like bimetallism, having a gold and silver-based economy, greenbackism, just print dollar bills. That's all you need. And the more dollar bills you print, the less they're worth. So just stop using gold and silver and print as many dollars as we can to drive down the value of our debts and end our debts for farmers. There'll be calls for the ends of business monopolies, and there'll be calls by these parties, as I've said before, for the government control of railroads. Where this is going to culminate is in the 1896 Democratic Convention. In 1896, the Democratic Convention ends up being a conglomeration of the Democrats and every type of populist political party out there in a means for the Democrats to try and win power. With the exception of Chester Arthur and I believe one or two other presidents, there had not been a Democratic president or Democratic control of the government since 1860. Even Chester Arthur, as a Democrat, was a very unpopular Democrat. He served 2 terms. He's the only president who's ever served 2 non-consecutive terms in office. So the Democratic Party is scrambling for some way to break the back of the Republican Party. And what we have here is really the rise of the Democrats as the populist party. They're going to bring in the farmers, the labor unions, the social reformers, and they're going to beseech them to support the Democrats. And they're going to, what happens is instead of concentrating on one message and trying to push that message, the Democrats end up dispersing their message across so many issues that it's hard to say they're actually taking a stand for anything. Most famously, at the 1896 convention, William Jennings Bryan, the nominee, the perpetual nominee for president, he'll run 4 times for president and never win. Will give a speech from the dais at the Democratic National Convention to bring in the populists, to show that the Democrats really want their support. He gives what is called the Cross of Gold speech. Do not hang labor on this cross of gold, he says, combining the issues, trying to rally the support from the populists. He will. He will get the support of the Democratic Party. He will get the support of all of these populists. They're not able to defeat the Republicans in 1896. William McKinley will be elected the Republican president that year. In essence, this is going to defeat the populists at the end of the 19th century. Populism will continue to rear its head. As I've said, we have a form of populism being talked about in the news. Populism is not always a good thing. I've used examples here based on the belief in the need to reform society or make the economy run on a different mode rather than one that is being used the gold standard in a time of economic upheaval. Populist parties can run on hatred. Populist parties can run on racist ideals. And in the South during this period, they will. I can almost guarantee you, everybody who gives a temperance speech in the South in the 1880s or 1890s will reference African Americans and the way they behave when intoxicated as the reason for the need for temperance. We have strong anti-immigrant context for these populist movements in the 1880s and 1890s. So populism is pushed by the people. It's a popular idea pushed politically by the people. It's just because it's popular doesn't mean it's necessarily a good idea or it's a needed reform. And that's why many of these reforms are defeated with the defeat of William Jennings Bryan. People in town don't care if farmers have their debts devalued because their dollar gets devalued. What happens to their buying power? What happens to their ability to pay rent, buy a house, pay their bills when they're not in debt? If you don't drink, or if you're one of these targeted groups, you're going to vote against the Women's Christians Temperance Union because I'm German and I think what you're doing is a direct assault on me. So not every populist movement is an accepted movement. Not every populist attempt at reform is a good reform. But we'll come back to temperance after the First World War. One last thing before we leave today. Every so often, The Wizard of Oz is put forward as a populist ideal because it's written in this period. It's published in 1900. Some people say this is true. Some people say that this is wishful thinking and there's nothing actually to back the idea of The Wizard of Oz as a parable for populism. Let's just say that it is. There are certain aspects that tend to smack of truth. Let's just say that where there's smoke, there may be fire. The Wizard of Oz is written by a man living in Kansas, which is the center of the agrarian populist movement. It's published right after the defeat of William Jennings Bryan. The Wicked Witch of the East is often seen as being a symbol for industry in the eastern half of the United States. The Wicked Witch of the West are those issues that pertain to farming. Dorothy is an analog for Mary Elizabeth Lease. Pardon me, that's her correct name. I think I may have accidentally said Warren. I apologize. It's Mary Elizabeth Lease. In the original book, she does not wear ruby slippers to go home. She wears silver slippers. The lion, the cowardly lion, is William Jennings Bryan for his inability to win, but his great lion-like oratory skills. The farmer is seen as the scarecrow. The Tin Man is dehumanized labor. Uh, these are great ideas. Are they actually parables for what's going on in the late 19th century? I'll let you decide. All right, that's it for today. I will email this out to you. I will get another lecture up on Friday. Next week, we will have 3 20-minute lectures, and I will post the exam on Monday. It will be due the following Sunday. So we will continue lecturing while the exam is being done. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm doing my best to get this course back on track. I hope you guys have a great day.